aware, aware of this marijuana solution.
Hi, this is Robert with FloridaMarijuana.net, and we're speaking with Dale Jackson from Colin's Voice today. He's a cannabis crusader from Georgia who has developed a cannabis oil that's a 2-to-1 CBD to THC ratio that focuses on treating children with autism and how you can do something to change the laws in your area if your special needs child does not have access to cannabis oil. Thanks, and enjoy the show.
Aware of this marijuana solution.
Let me ask you this: what was it? What was it like for you the first time that you realized that cannabis not only could but was helping your son? Like what thoughts went through your mind initially? You know, given the propaganda that we've grown up with.
Well, I came into this movement not because of my son, but because of my best friend. I'll never forget the conversation that I was having with my friend, and he had a daughter that was 18 years old battling seizures, and he was explaining to me the surgery that they had scheduled for her to implant a sensor into her brain to monitor her brain activity, and then if that turned out well, then they were going to have another brain surgery to actually remove a piece of her brain, and then she was going to have to potentially learn how to talk again, learn how to walk again. And so I mentioned to him, I didn't really know anything about medical cannabis oil, but I told him that there was this movement up at the Capitol, and he should look into it. And within 3 weeks, his family they were living in Colorado, and his daughter was experiencing the first seizure-free week in years.
That's significant.
And so in order to support him, and I was already at the Capitol just because I've been involved in politics for years, and so that's when, just to support him, I, joined the movement back in 2014, and then it kind of led over into 2015, and then 16, and during that process is when I began to hear about possible benefits for autism, and my son, who is severely autistic, with Colin, our main focus with him is focusing on cognitive development. Because of issues he had as a baby with his brain and delayed development, we do feel like that the CBD cannabinoid is beneficial for cognitive development. And then, but most importantly, in addition to CBD, we have discovered that THC is extremely beneficial for children with autism. And so that's how we came about developing Colin's Voice, which is a 2-to-1 ratio. It's a 2-part CBD, 1-part THC ratio.
And what type of profile is it? Is it indica dominant, sativa dominant? Is it a good mix?
It's a hybrid that we have developed, working with individuals in other states.
Okay. And how did you come about to this ratio? Obviously through some form of trial and error, but did you notice a significant difference when you started to increase the level of THC with the CBD?
Well, there certainly was some form of trial and error. There's always going to be a element of trial and error because every human body is going to react differently to levels of CBD or THC or THCA, but we take a much more scientific approach to treating with cannabis and the study of the receptors in the bodies and which receptors and which symptoms you're trying to treat. And sometimes I feel like that as a movement, people think it's too much of a trial and error, and they're too quick to change the dose or to change the ratio. And a lot of times we have seen, especially treating with autism, that if you stay the course and slowly increase the dosage, then you can see positive results. And it's important that everyone give their body ample amount of time to react. And it needs to be consistent medicine with consistent dosing at consistent times. And that's one of the main reasons why we are fighting so hard for the legalization, because we want effective medicine. And there are a lot of people, and we understand people they can get desperate and they make it on their own. It's perfectly, anyone almost can make it in their kitchen. But when you do that and you don't have access to lab testing of what you just made, how do you know the potency? How do you know the levels of the various cannabinoids in that medicine? And is that medicine what your child or even yourself need? And it makes for dosing to be virtually impossible. And that's where you get the trial and error from, is when you're just making it in your kitchen instead of, we prefer to work with exclusively lab-tested oils and tinctures so that we know exactly what's in that medicine. And then that gives our patients that we're helping that knowledge, and then we can then help them with proper dosing and find the right levels that they need.
And are the lab results available for the patients?
Absolutely. We provide anyone that asks for any lab, we provide those.
Would you?
We have labs on our concentrate, and we have labs on our tinctures.
Could you provide those to me, post-interview?
Sure.
Okay. And do you care to talk about how many patients that Colin's Voice is currently helping?
We are in charge of designing these oils that we are helping families, and currently we are helping hundreds of families, mostly with autism, but anything from ALS to some seizure patients, cancer patients, MS. We're actually working with doctors at a well-known MS center doing a study. We're also talking with a national organization right now about doing a study with veterans specifically to study the effects of cannabis oil and PTSD.
That's so great to hear. I'm a Navy veteran. Anything I could do to support those guys, it's unfortunate that they don't have access.
Yes, it is. Very unfortunate.
Hopefully, the VA situation will be addressed soon. So, what are your plans going forward through the legislative process? Since you mentioned earlier that you were a little late getting started this time.
Well, and we're already preparing for the 2017 legislative session here in Georgia. And this time around, our group of families are planning on taking a much more proactive role in actually writing the legislation and working with legislators to build alliances in our state Senate and our state House and work to getting the law changed. Our focus in 2017 will be to increase the number of conditions covered under our current law. And most importantly, we want to include autism in that list of covered conditions. And then in addition to increasing the number of conditions, our next priority obviously is to get some form of a cultivation bill passed.
Absolutely.
So that people actually have access to oil. And so while that's going to be the most difficult thing to pass is the cultivation bill, we also understand, and this is what many states where this is not already legal, those in those states need to understand that more than likely you're only going to get one shot to pass a legitimate cultivation bill. And it's more critical to pass a great cultivation bill than just passing something. Because legislatures have a tendency to address an issue, and then once they do, they don't want to address that issue again for 3 to 5 years. And more importantly than even that, once you pass a law, then law enforcement is going to expect you to follow that law. And I say that to say that last year with the cultivation bill we tried to pass, it was modeled after the Minnesota law. And we didn't know it at the time, but there's a major problem in Minnesota right now, and that's the fact that the bill that they passed is so overly regulated and restrictive that the oil that they can legally buy in Minnesota is outrageously priced. So the families can't afford it.
Yeah.
It's fine to have it, but we're providing families with oil for around $130 to $150 a bottle. And in Minnesota, that same bottle, because of the government regulations, would cost between $800 and $900 a bottle. And it's not covered under insurance. But that's why it's so critical, because law enforcement here in Georgia is, quite frankly, turning a blind eye to what's going on because they know there's no legal option for our families. But once we pass a cultivation bill, they're going to expect us to adhere to that law.
Which is reasonable.
Right. And so, but what would almost be worse is to pass a law and then have the byproduct of that law be oil that costs between $800 and $900 and you can't afford it. But then law enforcement is going to be very strict and make sure that you buy that legal oil instead of buying it, on the black market.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a bill or not a bill, but a petition going around for the next election session in 2018 by Florida Cannabis Action Network, and theirs is pretty short and sweet, and it says anyone over 21 years of age has the right to possess, use, and cultivate cannabis. And obviously that would still leave children out because not all parents are 21 years of age and older, but there has to be cultivation in the legislation. So what are some things that you have done to make this cultivation bill that you're trying to get in better than the last one?
Well, for starters, we are actually writing the legislation, so we feel like that it will be much more family friendly. In addition to that, we are rolling out a very significant fundraising drive. Not only is our goal to help raise money for families to actually be able to purchase oil while we're fighting to change these laws, but also the most important thing people can do in a state is show up at the Capitol. And that's very difficult for families with special needs children. So part of the reason why we're raising money is so that we can afford not only to help families have gas money to get to the Capitol, but to actually set up, child care for the families that show up at the Capitol. And we're also hiring our own lobbying firm that is very passionate about our movement and very knowledgeable about our movement. And also, most importantly, have proven that they can be trusted to have our best interests at heart. So that's our strategy for 2017. And also, we're going to invest a lot of money in educating the public, because obviously, it unfortunately it takes money to fight 40 years of bad propaganda against this medicine.
Yeah, and it takes a lot of money. And
to be effective, yes.
Yeah, the mass media world we live in, it's dominated by money, which is unfortunate. And you mentioning that having people that you trusted, that's big, because in a lot of states, sometimes people's best wishes have been co-opted by political forces for various business interests.
Right. And I think that is something that my role in this process is, because I have been involved in the political process way before I knew anything about cannabis oil. And so I know the players here in Georgia. I mean, I know all the legislators. And I think that in the past, the families were there just fighting for themselves, fighting for families. But they weren't aware of just how dirty and nasty politics are at our state capitals.
Well.
And so I feel like that I kind of see my role in leading this legislative process to make sure that our families are not being just taken advantage of and being used in any way for someone else's profit. And unfortunately, that's what happens in most states.
Yeah, that a lot of people would say that's what's happened in Florida, because the law here was nicknamed the Charlotte's Web Law, and the Stanley Brothers website, CW Hemp, ships to all 50 states. So they're wondering, why do I need to wait 90 days to get a doctor's recommendation to purchase this? And I believe some of the dispensaries may even be selling Stanley Brothers products.
Well, I've certainly heard the stories of Sotera, who I believe is one of the only licensed growers in Florida.
Yeah, they're one of the 6.
Yeah. And they're planning on coming to Georgia as well. But we're familiar.
True Leave, the dispensary that's opened up the first 2 in the state, they just opened up one in Clearwater, is actually a startup from Atlanta. They're purchasing somebody's license, renting it.
That's not surprising.
No, and when Florida tried to sell everyone on the nurseries need 30 years in business and 400,000 plant minimum, it was to keep outsiders away. Well, that obviously wasn't the case. I'm sure it got sold somehow. A lot of people have been fighting court battles over the whole process of how they've awarded them. A lot of people are crying foul, which is unfortunate.
And that was one of our bill last year was that we didn't write, and frankly, I hated this idea, but our bill originally said that they were only allowed to issue between 2 and 6 licenses. And to me, that's just crazy. I mean, why would you limit the number of businesses that can open up and be in business? We don't do that in any other industry.
Not except for maybe, our utilities.
Well, yeah.
That's shenanigans. That's what people said about Florida, too. Why is there only 6? And they broke them up into what they called regions, but it doesn't matter what region they're from. They're all opening storefronts across the state and delivering across the state. but only six. Six dispensaries can't supply a state that has 20 million people.
I completely disagree with any limitations on licenses. I mean, as long as they're qualified, if you have 100 qualified growers or 6 qualified growers, what's going to be best for the families of Florida or Georgia? More competition. More competition leads to better product and lower prices.
And more therapeutic medicine for your families as a result.
Exactly.
Yeah, we don't support any limitations whatsoever. To my knowledge, correct me if I'm wrong, there's been no documented proof outside of propaganda pieces that cannabis does any harm. Outside of maybe you get sick or, if you eat too many brownies. But
the only recorded death due to THC was one case from synthetic THC, but we're still waiting on the first overdose from cannabis plant.
Yeah,
And it's impossible.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to happen. They recently started selling pure THC isolate in Southern California for about $200 a gram. So I'm pretty sure if someone would die from THC overdose, they've already explored that.
I would tend to agree with you.
That's a fun place to go for a trip every now and then. What has been the biggest improvement that you've seen with the children with autism through the cannabis oil? Has there been anything that stood out? You mentioned cognitive earlier.
Well, in the autism world in cannabis oil, there are two different focus points. And so we typically will categorize our autistic patients as either those needing communication improvement or cognitive improvement, and then the other category is extreme behaviors.
Okay.
For my son, thankfully, he does not demonstrate any extreme self-injuries behaviors, but before we started cannabis oil, we could not communicate with our son in any way. I could not tell him anything. I could not communicate with him in any way. And since starting cannabis oil treatment on March the 3rd of this year, there have been numerous incidences that I have been able to communicate with my son. And simple day-to-day things like simply telling him that it is time to eat and for him to get up and walk over to the kitchen table. Or one of the things that my son loves to do is he loves to be outside. He loves to play on our back porch. And unfortunately, my 8-year-old son is still not potty trained. And so that means that, I have to change his diaper frequently. And in the past, when it came time for me to have to change his diaper, I would have to bring him in from outside. And he would get extremely upset because he thought that I was, that playtime was over. But
Right.
Now, I'm able to talk to him and explain to him that, I'm just taking you inside to change your diaper, and then I'm going to let you come right back outside. And he understands that. And he still can't talk to me, but he can communicate, and I can communicate with him. And another example, just the other day, I was feeding him, and normally he really likes to watch a video on my phone while he eats.
Mm-hmm.
And when he doesn't want to eat, there's no feed. You can't force feed him anything. And so I was trying to feed him his sandwich, and I didn't have my phone turned on. And so I kept trying to, put pieces of his sandwich in his mouth, and he kept grabbing my hand. But I noticed it was different this time, because normally he would just grab my hand to stop me and push it away. But this time, he was trying to grab my hand and remove my hand. And it took me a few minutes, but I realized that my phone was just face down on the table, and he was trying to grab my phone with my hand. And that was him telling me, I want you to show me a video, and then I'll eat. Well, I mean, that alone was amazing.
Oh, I can only imagine.
Then I took it one step further, and so did he. When I told him, I said, no, Colin, I'm not going to show you a video until you start eating. And he reached down and picked up the sandwich and started eating it on his own. And then I immediately turned on his video. But not only could he communicate with me that he wanted me to play him a video, but I was able to communicate with him that two-step process of, you need to eat, and then I'll show you a video. And he understood it. And in my world, that's amazing.
Yeah, I'm sure there's nothing you wouldn't do, to achieve such great things like that. I mean, that had to be amazing the first time that you made that connection in that manner, and actually, realized that he was definitely communicating to you.
It was definitely life-changing for us. And what is the changes that we have seen in Colin have been truly amazing, but the changes and the improvement that I see in other autistic children is equally amazing in a different way. But we're currently treating dozens and dozens of children with extreme behaviors, extreme autistic behaviors, and the stories that I have to hear every day of mothers that are, quite frankly, scared to death of their sons because of their emotional and the rage that they see demonstrated in their son. And then once they try our other oils that we have specifically to treat that, it's an immediate change where they go from an all-out rage of beating their head against the wall and smashing themselves on the ground to a joyful child again. And I mean, you want to talk about life-changing when, the society doesn't understand autism. It is easier for society to imagine all autistic children being Rain Man, or being that, we've all seen that video of that autistic child singing at a concert or playing a piano like a prodigy.
Yeah, savant.
Nobody wants to picture and see the real autism and what it really looks like behind closed doors. And that is, more than not, a single mother scared to death of her 13-year-old child.
Yeah, it's devastating.
And that's who we're able to help. And there again, and I try to point this out as often as possible, but we do not claim to cure autism. We treat the symptoms of autism. And what I have seen is, and I've seen it with my own son because this time last year I actually started a special needs school that focuses on autism therapy. And that school has done amazing things for Colin, but it's, in my opinion, a lot of his advancements started to come after we started treating him with cannabis oil. Because the cannabis oil has a way to quiet down the noises in autistic children that give them the ability for their therapies to actually work. I mean, the way I explain it a lot of times is, think of your own self trying to learn how to speak German. I'm assuming you don't know how to speak German.
I do not.
But think of you sitting down with a tutor trying to teach you how to speak German. But the whole entire time this tutor is trying to teach you how to speak German, they make you wear earphones where Van Halen is blaring at decibel level, 1,000. Now, how difficult is it going to be for you to learn how to speak German when you can't even hear what your tutor is saying because of the noises in your head?
Not going to happen.
And so it's not going to happen. You're distracted by your body is, for the most part, in continuous sensory overload. And I feel like, very passionately, that cannabis oil has a way to quieten down that sensory overload so that then the other more traditional therapies can be effective. And I feel like that's the way it is for my son and his condition. And then with the other autistic children that we're treating, their behaviors are so extreme that they can't physically go to school. So, and especially now that school is just starting back, I'm getting messages every single day from parents and families that this is the first year that their child has been able to go to school because they couldn't be controlled before taking cannabis oil. And so, that's life-changing. Not only is that life-changing for the family to have their child be able to go to school, but now that their child has the ability, for better therapies and to learn to sustain themselves and not, have to be cared for 24/7.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's some significant improvement. Some research has led people to theorize that the endocannabinoid system acts as an on-off switch, which is why it does what it does with the varying list of symptoms and ailments that it tends to do really well with. Does that sound kind of accurate? Turning down the awareness so the kids have a little bit less noise?
I am a firm believer that is part of the solution. And in the special needs school, the Discovery Cottage that I started last year, we take a very holistic approach to therapy. And it's not, it's holistic in the sense that we don't teach our children to just parrot what we're doing. We're actually addressing the brain and helping the brain to develop new pathways. And a major part of your brain's health is your gut health.
Absolutely.
And the nutrients that go into your body. And the endocannabinoid, the whole system is all tied together to everything. And that's also, which kind of leads us into another topic that I'm extremely passionate about, and that is the differences in CBD and whole plant medication.
Yes.
And while I do feel like CBD is very helpful, it's very healthy, it's good for everybody, CBD is not the fix for everybody. And I'm not a proponent for CBD extract. I was very disappointed to hear that Charlotte's Web, from my understanding, is now 100% CBD extract with no THC in it. I fully believe that THC is extremely important to the health of your body. As a matter of fact, statistics show that on average, children with autism, their too much CBD can actually have a negative effect. And granted, I don't want anyone to misunderstand me. It's not dangerous, but CBD can actually make the stemming of autism worse if you do not have a significant level of THC to go along with the CBD. And that's the reason why I'm not a proponent for treating autism with these hemp oils that, are a 20-to-1 ratio of CBD to THC. I do understand that there are some autistic children out there that have seen, that have benefited from hemp oils, and that's great. And that just goes to show you that every human body is going to react a little bit differently to cannabis in general. But on average, I feel very passionate about whole plant medicine.
That's something that's very important. There's another organization that I have heard similar reports about too much CBD can have somewhat of a negative effect, and it involved children having seizures. And they're big proponents of whole plant medicine as well.
Yeah, that's one of the things that our studies have shown, and a lot of people that we're helping with, for seizure control, THC has been shown to be very beneficial for seizure control. THCA has been shown to be very effective for some. I would say maybe more so with adults, but there again, the point is, it's not that any one medicine or any one product out there is this is the best, or this is bad for everybody. At the end of the day, we're just trying to help people understand what this medicine is and how it works, and that it's not a one size fits all.
Absolutely,
and that's. I'm a huge. I can't stand it when I hear people refer to cannabis oil medicine as CBD medicine or CBD oil. That's very confusing to people, because then they Google CBD oil, and what are they going to find? They're going to find, something that's available at their health food store right down the street. And then they're going to go and try it because they think that, this is cannabis oil. And then it may not work for them. And so then they think people like you and I are just, a bunch of shysters that are, scamming everybody.
Correct. And, that's something that the hemp industry players that are really on the up and up make sure to inform their customers of that. But one of the knocks on the CBD hemp industry is there's a lot of people doing it, and not everyone is on the up and up. Like, I've had many people just flat out refuse to give me any type of testing results of any of their products, and I'm like, I don't put stuff in my body where you're at least not going to show me, what's going into it.
Absolutely. And if you don't have it lab tested, then there again, back to what I said earlier, if it's not lab tested, then how do you know what the potency is? How do you know what levels the different cannabinoids that are in there? And that's not medicine. And our objective is that we're asking society, and we're asking our state legislators to treat this like medicine, because we know there is medicinal value in it. And so we have to treat it like medicine ourselves. So therefore we have to know what's in it. We have to have it lab tested.
Absolutely. Lab testing is 100% the way to go.
It's a necessity. It's imperative. And like what you mentioned, the individuals and the companies out there, hey, thank God that those companies are out there and they're able to help people, some legally, but I have a major problem with a website that just allowed any and everybody to go and order a bottle of oil. Because, who is that patient? What are they trying to treat?
Right.
If you have an open website that just allows any and everybody to order, mean, do they know if they need a 20-to-1 ratio or a 15-to-1 ratio? No. I mean, where's the support system to talk to that patient to find out, well, what are you trying to treat? Well, you know what? Maybe this particular bottle of oil isn't what you need. But that person is now going to order what in their mind is cannabis oil, and they're going to use it, and then what's the first thing they're going to think about if it doesn't work? Well, I knew that whole, medical cannabis oil movement was a load of crap, and it was simply because they didn't get the type medicine they needed, because we just had an open website and just let them order. Anybody order it.
Yeah, and to, further follow that point, how do you think legislation like what we have in Florida, where the low THC program is essentially hemp CBD oil, do you think that may also cause people to not believe in it? Because there's two different types you can get. The medicinal cannabis can have any level of THC. Then the low THC one is it's like 1% or less.
Yeah, the federal government defines it as 0.3% and less.
Well, it might be something like that.
I think in Florida it actually is 1%.
Right, which
That's
is still
what was approved.
Which is nothing. I mean, if you're using something really in high CBD, because that's what you're talking about earlier, is the ratios. So all they can get here is really high CBD ratios. And if you need THC to activate some of the other cannabinoid profiles, it's hard to get access to.
Right. And I think that the question you were asking is, and it's kind of going back to, our terminology, the words that we use, and helping people to understand. And yes, I believe that in the mind of an average parent that doesn't know all the ins and outs of this medicine, I think it's dangerous not dangerous to them, but dangerous to the movement for them to, think that they are using and purchasing cannabis oil when in reality it's a very restrictive hemp oil that's practically just CBD. And then what happens if it doesn't work? And they could make a 180-degree turn and be very anti-cannabis oil at that point, just based on a misinformation on their part.
And misprescription and ordering by the regulations that were put in place that required it.
Right.
Which goes back to another point. Regulations usually have no good purpose for the general public.
Regulations are only there to help the well-connected with government.
That's it, because they're the only ones that can afford it.
Right.
What are some things, maybe to go back to what Colin's Voice is doing, that Colin's Voice is doing, maybe in the activism role? I know we're getting you down for Hemp Fest. Are there other events that you have lined up?
Well, I'm talking with Peter Barnes with Fox News Business Channel.
Excellent.
And I was able to share my story with him, and he interviewed me at the National Convention in Cleveland, and we're working on getting up to New York to do a full in-studio interview. And we put a lot of effort into the logo for Colin's Voice. I'm not sure if you've seen that yet, but
I sure have. Looks sharp.
And it's not to be flashy and to be, make money off the logo. The logo tells a story, and autistic parents and the autism community as a whole, they're looking for answers. And so I put a lot into that logo because I wanted that logo to explain what we're doing and to speak to those families. Because my passion is all about helping families with autism. But there's so many out there that just don't understand it. They don't understand the possible benefit. And so I feel like that Colin's Voice, the oil, but most importantly, his story, has been able to help hundreds of families around the country and, frankly, around the world. Because I have people contact me every day from all around the world, and that we may not can help them, but at least they're learning about the benefit and investigating themselves, and hey, if they live in a state like California or Washington or where it is already legal, then they're able to gain access that way. Unfortunately, autism is not covered in nearly every single state. Even in Colorado, it would be illegal for me to treat my son in Colorado, which a lot of people don't understand.
Right. Yeah, most people just assume that it's A-okay, and I frequently have to tell them that no, families run into trouble there as well.
Yeah.
Depending on what they're trying to treat their child for. Which brings me to another question I wanted to ask you. There's a Facebook page that is pretty prominent. They have about 250,000 fans called Illegally Healed. What does those two terms mean to you? Because essentially that's what you're doing.
Well, we certainly are. On the federal and state level, we are, illegally treating our son. To me, that phrase is very painful. And quite frankly, it makes me angry that of all things that parents with special needs children are asked to do on a daily basis that we can't control, and we're going to be faced with more than likely for the rest of our lives, and for a medicine to be available that could just, at the bare minimum, improve the quality of life for our children and for our families. And to ask our families to break the law is inhumane. And I get so angry when I'm at the Capitol and I'm having discussions with the governor's chief of staff, and I'm having discussions, behind closed doors with the chairman of the district association, the district prosecutors and the sheriff's association, and they all tell me one-on-one, hey, just take care of your son. Do whatever you need to do to take care of your son. Well, that's fine and dandy for me, but what about all the other 60,000 autistic families in Georgia? You're not telling them anything. To them, they don't understand that law enforcement and government in general does not want to touch a special needs family just trying to treat their child. Now, does that mean that they're just going to let everybody, that wants to smoke pot and get high, are they going to let you get away with that? No, they're not. But this is medicine, and we're not getting anybody high. And they understand that, but they won't tell people that. They won't tell people that they're not going to go after families. They allow them to be scared to death. And that makes me so angry, because I know all these families that are hurting, and I know what they deal with on a daily basis. But they're too scared that government's going to step in and take their children from them.
And they have done that in many cases. So families have a right to feel that way. And, it's like living under persecution. And I think that's what a lot of people don't understand is, this is medication. And families are willing to risk going to prison to treat their child. We need to back those families. We need to let the politicians know it's not okay if you mess with them. The regular system of care has failed them to some extent. It needed this extra component.
Right, and that's one of the things that we've done in Georgia is we've actually set up, and we have a group of lawyers that have agreed to take, if any family does, if it comes to that, we have a group of lawyers that's willing to take on their case for free and defend them in court. And I think that's an important aspect as well for every state.
Yeah, that's huge. Have you thought about maybe, modeling what you've done and try and branch out to other states where families are being affected in a similar manner?
Well, we certainly have. We helped out with Alabama. You know, Alabama just passed Lenny's Law just literally a couple of months after our session ended this year. And so frankly, I live like 10 minutes away from Alabama, and I have a business in Alabama as well. So we kind of ventured over to Alabama to help their families as well, just with advice and kind of, you know, telling them, you know, what worked for us and what didn't work and so forth. I would love, you know, to have the time and the ability to duplicate what we're doing in Georgia in other states. Right now, of course, our focus is just getting a good law passed in Georgia. You know, and then we would certainly be willing to, you know, branch out. I mean, that's part of, you know, one of the reasons why I want to come down and speak at HempFest is to be able to share some of our ideas. Because the better laws y'all have in Florida, the likelihood that our laws will be, you know, better in Georgia. So we're kind of all in this together, but, you know, we're all fighting in different locations.
Right, which brings its own set of rules.
Right.
You were mentioning that you raise money to get people to go to the Capitol. When is that, and would you be interested in organizations from Florida coming and speaking too? Because
we would definitely be interested. We haven't nailed down any specific rallies yet, but we're definitely going to have some rallies at the Capitol, and we would be certainly interested in bringing up some people. We, you know, once we get our legislation and once we get it submitted, we'll, you know, have subcommittee hearings and so forth to discuss it, and that would be another opportunity that, you know, individuals from Florida could come up and just share their experience and the reasons why a certain piece of the legislation is good or bad, or why it needs to be there.
Excellent. I will, when I follow up with you by email, I'll put you in contact with a couple of people. Had mentioned that they would be interested, because I mentioned that Georgia was going through some, you know, significant battles, and your story is, you know, just so amazing, and just want to, you know, tell you thank you. You give a lot of hope to a lot of people, and what you're doing is great. It's really great to bring awareness to the plant and the benefits that it has, and just in general for people to stand up for what they know is right, despite what an authority may tell you.
Well, thank you very much. I can promise you that the irony is not lost on me. I mean, as someone who is a traditional Republican and deacon in my church, and someone who never smoked pot, you know, and now I find myself, you know, leading the movement here in Georgia. It's quite ironic.
Yeah, it is. But, you know, it takes people like you to get into people who are in your network, you know, like the traditional Republican, and that's significant because a lot of times it takes somebody being taught very personal and close to you to finally say, wait a minute, maybe what I've been told is wrong.
Absolutely. And that I feel like that my background gives me a voice in, you know, I have a voice with an audience that our movement hasn't effectively communicated with yet. I love, and I spent a lot of my time traveling the state of Georgia, talking with, you know, your traditional, typical Kiwanis Club and Rotary Club and Lions Club, because I love to get in front of a room full of 100 people over the age of 60 years old that the only thing they know about cannabis is reefer madness. And after 20 minutes of explaining to them about this wonderful medicine and watching their whole entire demeanor completely change. And it doesn't, all it takes is information. And the problem is they don't have information. No one's explained to them that this is medicine and how it's medicine.
Right.
And it's a wonderful sight I start out and I shock them and tell them I want to talk about pie. And then by the end of explaining to them what I'm talking about, and I mean, just to see these individuals, come up to me and they're crying, they're bawling, because they see my son in their grandson. They're able to make that connection. And that's what we as a movement need to be doing more of, is going and talking and educating that generation of people.
That's very important, because there's some of the, demographic that you can count on going to the polls, and
that is true. They vote.
They
like
sure
it or
do.
not, they vote.
Yes, they do. Which is why we're hoping in Florida this time we can get something passed, since it's the presidential election and more young voters come out.
Yeah, I think that is a good strategy as well.
Yeah. Well, hey, Dale, I appreciate it. This has been great. It's been an excellent conversation. Everything you're doing is so awesome, and, any way that I can help, whether it's just connecting you with people I know, I'm going to be happy to do it. I really love what you're doing and wish you the best.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome.